This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for another journey on Avoid the Maze. And the maze is what we're all in. The maze is life. And some of us just need a little bit of help maneuvering through it. I know I surely have in my 75 years, and I'm sure I will continue as I get older. Today, my guest is Tanya Prince. I met Tanya through podmatch.com. And Tanya, as I was reading your bio, I know you've worked with um, corporations in the past, but one of the things I've read in your bio, you're realizing that the changes that you bring into the corporations are the same changes that you offer individuals. So
Yeah.
we are our own corporation, so to speak. So how
Mhm.
did you get in this and what made you work with corporations and now make you maybe focusing more on individuals?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So I would say that it was like all of us, a progression and a journey, right? So I definitely was in the maze for the first part of my career in life. So what I would describe it at is what I call a formulaic or templated life. That we kind of follow these patterns. We kind of just get on this path of what we should do, what we're taught to do, and that can vary, by area of the country, by part of the globe, from our cultural background. For me, I was the daughter of a truck driver and an immigrant, and so for me, I really grew up in that bootstrap mentality, that the idea of doing better, of moving, like going to college, excelling, getting a good job. Like it was always the focus as a even for me as a very young person, I think a lot of people can relate to this, was get a job and do well. It's all about from a very young age focusing on what are you going to do? It's how we define ourselves, right? It's the first question we ask one another, what do you do? So for me, as I journeyed through my career, I really moved into a discipline called continuous improvement, which is all about organizational change and moving from point A to point B, and what are the steps to get there. And so I was in that field of continuous improvement, and then I moved into change management, which is all about how do you move people from point A to point B. So that people aspect began to be much more woven into the work that I was doing corporately. But what I found is I've always had a love for people. And I always saw my role and my purpose upon reflection. The advantage is that as you progress through your journey, you can look back and you can see the patterns, right? So for me, I saw even early when I was young and I was a cross country and track coach, coaching people, helping them realize their potential, helping them uncover their talent and purpose and identity was really part of my heart, part of what was in my blood. And I saw as I moved into coaching and becoming a certified coach, these things actually have a lot in common. So I kind of think about helping people create roadmaps from where they are today to where they want to go, where their purpose really is.
That is a lot. That is a lot. As I was listening, as you said, when you were young, you were a coach. Well, you still appear to be quite young. Um, I remember my youngest son, running track.
Yeah.
And he was not fast at all, but he wanted to run. He wanted to be part of a sport that um, he could succeed in. And because he was not the fastest, probably always came in last, his coaches never talked to him about his own personal success.
Mm.
And one of the things I'm seeing coaches are now starting to do more is yes, we're going to nurture those who can be winners and across the finish line, to win the race for us. But we also have to focus on the individuals who aren't going to be the first, aren't going to even be there at the halfway point. But when they do cross the finish line, they need to see that as a success. that they have completed the race. And I think that's the same way that we have to go through life, is that we're not always going to be number one. And being number one doesn't mean that you're perfect either. I mean, you may just have had a lot of energy that day and made it across the finish line. So, how do you help individuals go from that A to B and not expect that they're all going to get there the same way and have the same level of euphoria when they get there?
Yeah, well, track is actually such a wonderful analogy because I've always, and I guess like it's very, very correlated because when I was coaching young people, I loved helping them to see the reward of their individual efforts. So even if you were last in the race, and the group of kids I was coaching was an inner city group of kids, so we had the whole spectrum of kids, and more of our kids were actually toward the back. And I'll tell you a quick story on that. My first year I started coaching, my kids, would immediately go to the back. The race would start and they'd all go to the back. And had never seen anything like that before because as a young person, to your point, like I kind of had been a more competitive athlete. I'd gone to the University of Minnesota as a D1 athlete. And my heart broke. I'm like, what is happening where these kids are like, it's like they had trained themselves to go to the back and stay in the back. But as we worked together, their incremental wins, their improvements in their time, and that's what I actually love about running, is you see that improvement, your personal work. It's such a wonderful analogy for life. Your personal investment that you put in, but you need coaches, right? So I gave the kids the workouts, I gave them the encouragement, but they put the work in. So while I was walking alongside them, they put the work in and they improved and they got better and better and better. And we actually won conference by the end of the second season. And kids who had never had the confidence in themselves to improve and had major successes, like breakthroughs successes. And that's what I actually loved most. And so to your point, like when it comes to coaching people from point A to point B, I think first of all, it's what is the incremental success and are you recognizing it? Second, where is your unique talent and capability? So in the case of a track meet, there's the long distance runners, there's the sprinters, there's the hurdlers. Maybe you're not a long distance runner. Maybe you're meant to be a long jumper. Maybe you're meant to be a hurdler, but you're still in the track team. And it takes every single person living out their best skill, their best capability, or developing new ones sometimes. Like, and that's discovery of new things because you need to uncover that skill and talent, or you need to start digging in and tracing where you see your success and building on that. And that could take you to a whole new path. So it's actually a wonderful analogy. And I think it really like brightens my heart, even like thinking about that. So it's helping people not only see the results, their success, but also uncovering where should you be to accelerate that success.
So I worked in an industry. I worked for a private college, and I was um, an engagement rep, meaning that students who wanted to come to school would come in, they'd talk to me, you would enroll them. But I was very fussy on enrollment because it being a private college, our our fees were very high. And so when somebody came in and said they wanted to go to school, this is what they wanted to learn, I would talk to them about the realities. So I didn't enroll the top number. However, my enrollment stayed in school.
Yeah.
And yet, semester after semester, I'd have my hand slapped, telling me I wasn't successful.
Mm.
And I'd say, you're right, I didn't meet your idea of a success. You wanted me to enroll 50 new students this semester. I enrolled 18. All 18 are doing well and they're coming back next semester.
Right.
Out of the 50 that somebody else put in, how many are coming back?
Right.
And they'd
Right.
look at me and they'd say, but that's none of your business. And I'd say, but it is, because this is my success and this is how I'm going to live my life. So maybe I don't belong here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
eventually that's what happened. It was like, there's the door.
Mhm.
Um, and that's when I started working on podcasting and coaching, that I could reach out to people and say, don't have to be number one,
Yeah.
but you have to put the effort in.
Mhm.
And it's your effort which will equal your success.
Right. It's redefining what success means, like you said. And sometimes that means that your definition of success combined with your value system, right? And that in that example, that was definitely, it sounded like a part of your value system as
Yes.
well. And so when sometimes you can find that that's no longer in alignment, and you got to find a place where you are going to be in alignment with your passion, with your talent, with your value, with your authentic self. And I think that's something that's kind of more emerging as we think about purpose coaching. In particular, it's that alignment with your authentic self and identity and values. So it's less about how do I get to the next career step, which many people specialize in, and that's wonderful. But I want to go deeper to what is it that really is your passion, or what is it a part of you that you're passionate about that you can show up in and have success in your workplace. So it doesn't mean you're going to completely abandon where you work or what your career is, though sometimes that often that can occur. But it's also finding what that success measure is for yourself and thriving in it and accelerating in it, which then can actually result in maybe even career success in the current field you're in.
So I've heard a lot from generate older generations. When I say older generations, parents who are 50 and above, who are watching their kids
Mhm.
saying, I've got to find me, I got to find my purpose. And parents going back and saying, well, hey, I had to find my purpose. My purpose was I had to go get a job and put food on the table.
Uh-huh.
And the younger generation is saying that's true, but I'm not going to be good at doing that unless I'm feeling fulfilled. And there's this clash of, why is fulfillment so important today? So, can you tell me about your clients, how they succeed when they are fulfilling their own purpose?
Yeah, I honestly think that it's about finding the right way to express their authentic self wherever they're at. Because I view purpose and the purpose journey as like a river. So it may take you to different careers, it may take you to different disciplines, but there's something about your authentic self that you're tapping in everywhere along the way. So I think we have to, I think there's a line of I'm just going to completely abandon what I'm doing because I don't feel that I'm thriving in it and it's not my purpose. You might be missing out. You might
Yeah.
be missing out on your purpose right where you're at because you're grasping for something outside of yourself. So it really centers kind of back into, and young people in particular, they're still growing, right? I do think there's a lot of elements of us that stay unchanged. Like for me, my river, kind of starting back with being that track and field coach for young people. Now I also serve on my school board. So I still am connected to this passion for young people that has been in me from the start, but it's transformed and has looked different. So I think there's kind of this in between where the older generation was, look, like my value is I need to put food on the table to provide. And I don't even know what you're talking about when it comes to purpose or happiness, or like that's just not even in my view. To young people who are sort of in this quest for purpose. So I think that there is a middle ground there, but it does come down to do you have a good understanding of your identity, of what your passion, what your heart really calls you to? Have you acquired the skills, right? Especially when you're young, to be able to do that. And then are you willing to go on the river? Are you willing to move and be adaptable and just? Because I think we can be as rigid as to this or this is not my purpose as we are to I'm just here to be in a career to make money and my all my other stuff is outside of that.
I'm finding there are a group of women who are either close to retirement age
Mm.
or retiring, who have felt that they've never satisfied their inner self. And now they're saying, oh, it's too late. Now, I happen to be one that says, no, it's never too late. At 55, I made some huge changes. I'm 75 now, and I know I will continue to make changes because I realized that for the first 55 years of my life, I was happy, but I was satisfying everybody else and convincing myself that was my purpose. My
Yeah.
purpose was I was going to make Tanya happy today. So I'm going to do all the right things. And as long as she's happy, I'm happy.
Yeah.
And you can convince yourself that that's the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then sometimes you wake up and you're exhausted. You're
Mm-hmm.
exhausted trying to do for others. And then you start feeling, hey, I'm depleting myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love the concept of purpose coaching for people to really start to dig deep into themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me a long time, but once I started, it was like, this doesn't mean I'm abandoning my husband or my family. It
Right.
means I'm going to make them better for me because I'm going to find some satisfaction. So are there any tips that you give your clients as to how they can go down the river and not feel like they're leaving everybody,
Mm.
behind them?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you kind of already brought it up where it's when we're having a source of what gives us energy, what fills us up, we can show up better for others in our life as well. So to me, it's not an either or, right? So as I work with clients, you're right, there is this particular emerging group of people, particularly women, but I think men to some degree too, who have been placed in that cultural role of provider, who are now saying, huh, is there more to me than this? And if I'm not providing, then what's my value too? So the cultural norms are breaking down for both men and women. So to me, it's about finding what is lighting you up where you are today, acknowledging where it's not, and finding more of those natural observations in your life. And that's really with my journal that I've published. While it's faith-based, it is about observations. It's about what's draining me, to your point, what's lighting me up, and how can I find more balance around the things that are lighting me up? Because if I'm spending all of my time in those draining situations, I'm not going to be able to be there to fill the relationships, because it really is about relationships, and that's another shift, I think, versus the doing. And we're such a culture where we tend to value ourselves by what we produce, by what we do for other people. It's the do, 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 do. But if we refocus on the relationship, when we are in our authentic self and in our identity and in our purpose, we're actually better at all of those roles and relationships.
Well, and I agree with you because as a doer, I was getting to the point, and I'm still there at times. It's part of my DNA, I think, but I got to break through it. But um, I believe that it was my job, and I believed it. I'm not going to say my husband put me in this, but I was working full time. I clean the house, I cook,
Yeah.
I normally do the grocery shopping, I plan the meals, and that was all me.
Hmm.
And never once did I say to him, by the way, those dishes go in that cupboard. It was leave them here,
Mm.
I'll put them away.
Yeah.
And a couple years ago, I was ill, and I said to him, can you get me a bowl of cereal? Now he gets himself a bowl of cereal, so he knows where the bowl is and where the cereal is. But this time he was getting it for me. Never had gotten it for me. And now I'm actually asking. And he looked at me like I had horns growing out of my head. I said, what's wrong? He said, where are the bowls? And I said, what do you mean? Where do you get your bowl for cereal? Oh, those bowls. he couldn't put it together. But then I realized, hey, this is on me.
Yeah.
And that's when I've started to realize I keep giving, giving, giving. Now, when I need, I have to explain it. It's
Yeah.
taking a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes, again, to be your authentic self, who I thought I was being, I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
was doing what I thought everyone wanted me to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, any tools that you might have to help people become more authentic? I mean, how do we find
Yeah.
our
Yeah, I actually have a kind of a neat exercise to think about the different roles we play and to dive into each of those roles and understand how do we tend to show up in them. And are we showing up similarly or differently in them? And what type of emotions do we evoke or are evoked in us when we're in those roles? And what I have found is that we tend to shift colors. I like have this kind of visual of like a flower, right? And we tend to shift our colors when we're in the different roles. So how do we begin to kind of make our flower, so to speak, be one color because we're authentically showing up in all those spaces, knowing that we adjust, right? We certainly are not the same all the time, but how can we begin to really kind of look into each of those roles and better understand how we're showing up in them and what that's telling us about ourselves and why we're doing it and for what purpose? And just as you were saying, you did everything. I did that too. I was actually had my kids were infants. I was doing my MBA. I was in my career. And the gal next to me from my company, she's like, "Oh, you're just so amazing. You're Superwoman." At the time, I'm like, "Yes, I am. I am Superwoman." And I took a lot of pride in that badge of being Superwoman.
Sure.
But eventually, it was not sustainable. And I ended up at one point needing to drop all my classes. I was driving to go in to buy my books. I'm like, I can't do this. I cannot do all of this. So before we crash, right, having some of that understanding of, because a lot of times we don't even know we're at our limit. We think we got it all until we don't. Since that time, I'm now divorced. I went through some of that unsustainable aspects as well. Sometimes when you're trying to redefine the relationship or redefine the boundaries, people don't want you to change. So there's some of those difficult aspects of how do you change the rules that you made about yourself with other people?
You know, it's interesting because when I was working at the college, I loved what I did with my students. But as I stated, the culture was really killing me because I
Yeah.
didn't fit in. And when I spoke up, I wasn't being listened to. I mean, it was obvious I could say something and they'd turn it around back on me. And didn't realize how depressing that
Mm.
was.
Yeah.
And I kept working harder and harder.
Mm.
So, in theory, they didn't want us working more than 7.5 hours a day, but I was working 10 hours a day. I'd go in early, I'd stay late. I just kept feeling like the more I did, the more I'd be noticed. And the more I did at work, the more I did at home.
Mm.
I was getting angry.
Yeah.
Didn't realize how angry I was getting. So I understand when you brought up that picture of the flower. How are you showing up? I was showing up as an angry person, but different at each of those petals because for my family, they would forgive me for part of my anger. So I could be bright red. At work, well, I had to look like I was calmer. So maybe I
Mhm.
was a light pink, you know. And then I started thinking about family and friends, and at the time, my mother would call me 2, 3 times a week, and I was belligerent to her.
Mm.
Didn't realize it till afterwards. Was like, why did I just do that? So I think we have a sense of this when we're not being authentic.
Mhm.
Um, how do you recommend for the person who's going through this, like you did, like I have, to
Mhm.
finally say, I need something,
Mhm.
I need help. Where do I go for it?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm a strong believer in journaling and evaluation and analysis, right? And that's what coaches help to do, right? We
Right.
really are, we're drawing out the individual's own self-understanding that they just haven't articulated because they haven't had the opportunity to even like digest or think about these things. So I just love to make the connections as people are talking and said, you just said this. Did you use this word? So coaching can be really effective to help people, right? With the things that we even say that we don't notice we're saying, like you're saying, or the things you're feeling that we don't recognize. So to me, I think it is that pausing, it is the writing, it's the self-reflection, and then it's the patterns that you're connecting in that. So I think you first have to recognize that you have a problem, and I think a lot of us don't. We just keep going through, or we say that's just a bump for today. You don't notice, well, that was a bump 2 days ago, and 2 days before that, and oh my goodness, for the last year. So I think it's recognition, and then it's okay, well, what do I really want to get out of this? Where do I want this to be? And I love the envision future state type of exercises where it's like, well, what would your ideal state look like? What if it could be different tomorrow? What would you want it to look like? How would you want to see yourself? How would you others see you? What would you look like? But when I moved out of finance and moved more into the transformation and change work, people said I looked happier. I would walk around happier, my head up, a smile on my face instead of a scowl. But these are sometimes things that are really difficult for us to see ourselves and does require help to see that. And then navigating if I can picture what I want it to be, now let's take the steps to get there.
So you have a book out. So
Mhm.
tell us about the book and how we can find it.
Yeah, so my book is called Design for Purpose. It's a faith-based journal, discovering God's daily direction, and it is faith-based, but over the course of 4 weeks. There's a number of exercises that's really about your observation. So, what's bringing you joy that day? What obstacles have you encountered? You described a lot in your career there that eventually had you make a shift. So, obstacles can sometimes be an opportunity for us to grow, but sometimes they're a closed door. And so when you begin to journal every day in this kind of 4 weeks self-reflection, you begin to see those patterns in your life that you can then take action on. You can begin to recognize, is this a closed door? Or is this something I'm growing through, or is it just shifting me in another direction? Then there's elements as to how are you seeing the signals in yourself? How are you seeing the signals in your day? So it's a series of daily self reflections through a faith-based lens.
So if somebody wanted to work with you, how would they find you? How could they get your expertise to take them down the path?
Yeah, so greenvinecoaching.com is my site as well as my social media. So at Greenvine Coaching. And my book is available everywhere that books are sold. So your favorite retailer, online, everywhere.
Well, I encourage our listeners out there, coaching is not therapy.
No.
And I work with two different coaches and I work with them for different reasons. And I actually recommend that every once in a while they share information back and forth because it has helped me grow quite a bit. Um, and one of the great things that I have found is that I have spent a lot of money in therapy, and there were good reasons for therapy at times. But what I needed when I started working with coaches is I needed to be, I needed to steer my own ship.
Mhm.
And in therapy, I wasn't. I was digging up the past, and the past was sticking with me today. And I realized I don't have to carry it with me everywhere I go. And so in coaching, as I'm steering my ship, as these things maybe come to light, I get to choose. Do I want to think about it now? Or do I want to let it go into the back? There's nothing wrong with taking those memories and telling those memories, there's no room for you today
Right,
because I have something else I need to accomplish.
right.
So I hope people will reach out to you, Tanya, and learn more about purpose coaching, uh, get your book and take the 4 weeks and see what kind of transformation we can make.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. And I really do hope people check out Design for Purpose, and can make a difference in your life.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye
You
bye
too.
now.
Bye.